Most people are still asking the wrong question about AI. It's usually something like, what's the best model? Which one's top of the benchmarks? Which one should we be using? And to be fair, in 2026, those questions have answers. They're not really the ones that matter anymore. Because the most valuable thing a frontier model can do for your business isn't actually do the work. It's to train a cheaper, faster version of itself to do that work instead. That's the shift. Welcome to Convergence by Exact Market. I'm Guy Bartram. And today I wanted to talk about distillation, what it actually means in practice, why it matters commercially, and why the window to use it freely is starting to close. So first, frontier models. These are the big ones: GPT-4o, Claude, Gemini, Llama, incredibly capable, incredibly broad, but very expensive once you start to use them at scale. The easiest way to think about them perhaps is think about them like a Michelin star chef. They can do almost anything, but you can't afford to have one in every kitchen if you're running a chain. Instead, you bring that chef in for a while, they train your team, they show them how to do the food properly, what matters, what doesn't, how to get that grade of precision. But when they leave, your team isn't Michelin level across the board, but things you actually care about, they're very good, and they're a lot cheaper to run. That's basically what distillation is. The big model teaches, the smaller model learns, and you end up with something focused and cost efficient. Under the hood, it's pretty straightforward. You use a frontier model to generate outputs. They are a data generator based on defined input behavior. They'll cover answers, examples, reasoning, edge cases, and then you take all of the frontier's model's output and convert it into a consistent format to train your student model. Training a smaller model involves fine-tuning, evaluating results, iterating until you're happy, and deploying. So it learns to behave in a similar way, but without all the overhead. And what you get back is cheaper, faster, and more specific to your use case. It can outperform the general model because it's not trying to do everything anymore. Now, most people think about this as a cost advantage, and yes, it is, but that's not the part I think is most important. The bigger shift is that you can generate training data you don't have for edge cases you haven't seen yet, scenarios that haven't happened often enough, and new workflows you want to support. So instead of waiting months to collect real data, you just create it. And that compresses your improvement cycle massively. What used to take months now can happen in weeks and faster than that. And once you're in that loop, generate, train, evaluate, deploy, all of those cycles compound. And that's where the real advantage comes from. Now, until recently, this was hard to do properly. You needed research teams, custom pipelines, and a lot of engineering overhead. Now that barrier is mostly gone. OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, they've all productized this. You can build and run these workflows inside their platforms. And because of that, the market is starting to split. On one side, you've got companies treating AI as something they buy. They call the vendor API, they pay per token, and they ship features. And that's fine early on in development, but at scale, it's not great for economics. You don't own anything, your competitors can access the same models, and pricing power still sits with the vendor. On the other side, you've got companies starting to manufacture their own capability. They use frontier models as a starting point to generate data and shape behavior, and then distill that down into smaller models they control. Same inputs, but very different outcomes. One is renting, the other is building. Now, there's another layer to this that's not getting talked enough about. The window to do this. It's starting to close. Earlier this year, there were a number of disclosures from frontier providers about large-scale distillation attempts, people trying to steal the output. There was mass account creation, millions of interactions, all focused on extracting reasoning data. And since then, those major vendors have coordinated a response. They are implementing detection, tightening controls, and more scrutiny on how these models are being used. So practically, that means access is getting stricter, heavy usage is getting more expensive, and certain patterns of use are going to get flagged. So if your plan is to rely on frontier APIs to generate training data at scale, you should expect a little more friction going forward. There are two distinct ways to approach this. First, staying inside the vendor ecosystem. OpenAI, Azure, Google, they all support distillation and fine-tuning natively. It's cleaner from a legal and commercial perspective, has lower friction, and it's a great place to start. But you're still operating on their infrastructure. Secondly, going independent, taking those outputs and training your own models, Llama, Mistral, etc. Host them yourself, you then own them fully, and that's where you're going to get the strongest advantage. But that comes with complexity and, importantly, legal considerations. Because most providers don't want their outputs used to train competitive models, and that's now going to be enforced more actively. So if you go down that route, legal needs to be involved early. One thing I'll be very clear on, distillation itself isn't the moat. It's becoming accessible to everyone. The moat is the data. If you're training on your own workflows, your own customers, your own internal context, that's hard for someone to copy. If you're training on generic data, you've just built a cheaper version of something that anyone else could do also. So this raises kind of two questions. Firstly, how much of your AI spend is building something versus just paying for access? Like I said, renting is fine to start, but that doesn't compound. The opportunity is in identifying repeatable high volume use cases and building around those. Second, how fast can you improve what you've built? If it still takes months to make meaningful changes, that's going to be a problem because someone else in your market is probably running the loop much faster. And that gap can start to add up competitively. So from a go-to-market perspective, this is where I think things shift. It's less about we use this model and more about we can build and iterate models quickly for specific jobs. If you're a vendor, find the parts of your product where a specialized model would outperform a generic one. Build those in. Make them a part of your differentiation. Start with the vendor tooling and move further when it makes sense. If you're a cloud or managed service provider, there's an opportunity to package this, not just access to models, but the whole pipeline. Data, distillation, evaluation, deployment, governance, and increasingly data provenance as sovereign AI becomes more important. And if you're buying, stop asking what model someone uses. Ask how they improve it and how often. That will tell you a lot about what you're buying. The intelligence factory idea is still early. Tooling is there, the economics work, but access is tightening, regulation is catching up, and the easy window isn't going to stay open forever. So the real question is pretty simple. Do you build this capability now or end up paying someone else who already has it? I'm Guy Bartram. See you next time at Convergence.